So Lucifer is the god of this world, and it's not in some unpronounced metaphysical way, or some application or principle, but I'm going to show you this is a reality in the physical, intellectual world, that world leaders and organizations confess that Lucifer is their Lord. This is from a book written by President Obama's mentor named Saul Alinsky. And Obama says this is the guy who taught him how to become president, and he succeeded. And the book is called Rules for Radicals, and this is how Saul Alinsky dedicates his book. He says, quote, "Lest we forget at least an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to the very first radical, the first radical known to man who rebelled against the establishment and did it so effectively that he at least won his own kingdom, Lucifer." So Saul Alinsky, who taught your president how to become president and how to do what he does, taught him to be a community organizer, which meant that he was supposed to bring chaos. He dedicated his book, Rules for Radicals, to Lucifer. Here's another one. This has got me in a lot of trouble over the last 20 years, exposing the fact that Freemasonry is a religion dedicated to Lucifer. And there are people in the lower levels who are ignorant and choose to be ignorant. They choose to be blind to these facts. Trust me, I was recruited, though they say they're not supposed to recruit. I know what Freemasonry is all about. And when I've been confronted by Freemasons, I can quote their oath, I can do their handshake, I can tell them things that I'm not supposed to know. And I've seen them turn into practical devils spitting at me when they talk to me. And I have pretty good evidence that Billy Graham himself is a Mason. Norman Vincent Peale was a 33-degree Mason. Robert Schuller, 33-degree Mason. Some of the greatest leaders in apostate Christianity. Freemasonry had a beginning where it was actually a union. And it was made up of actual Mason bricklayers and people who were in construction. And when you see the wonderful, huge castles and cathedrals in Europe, that's who built it. But as the castles and the churches weren't being built as often, they started losing membership. So then they developed this fellow craft where they let people in who weren't technically Masons. And then they developed this thing that is more of a philosophical Masonry. And this Albert Pike, who was also the Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan during his lifetime, and he addressed the 23 Supreme Councils of the world in 1889, and this is a quote. It's a little lengthy, but follow this quote from Albert Pike. He says, quote, "The Masonic religion should be, by all of us initiates of the high degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. If Lucifer were not God, would Adonai, the God of the Christians, whose deeds prove his cruelty, perfidy, and hatred of man, barbarism, and repulsion for science, would Adonai and his priests calumniate him?" His answer is, yes, Lucifer is God. End quote. Here's a continued quotation. He says, quote, "And the true and pure philosophic religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai, but Lucifer, God of light and God of good, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil." End quote. Here's a guy named Manly P. Hall. And Manly P. Hall, 33-degree Mason, wrote The Lost Keys of Freemasonry, and it has been and served as one of the main guidebooks of the Freemasons. And in his book he says, quote, "When the Mason learns that the key to the warrior on the block is the proper application of the dynamo of living power, he has learned the mystery of his craft. The seething energies of Lucifer are in his hands, and before he may step onward and upward, he must prove his ability to properly apply energy." End quote. This kind of comes together now, because most of your politicians in the two major parties are Freemasons. Most of your politicians have sworn an allegiance to a false god named Jah-Baal-On. That's the Masonic god. And they are under, I believe, that's why we're being moved toward a new world order. And a lot of it isn't conspiratorial, it's spiritual. And it's because of that connection. But here's another example. Every July, world leaders gather, this goes on, by the way, in different parts of the world at different times of the year. But in America, it's in July, and they gather outside of San Francisco, California, in this thing called the Bohemian Grove. They actually take part in a ritual worship where they sacrifice in effigy to this giant owl idol. Now, do some homework on what the owl means in occult religion, and you'll be shocked. When you read about Molech in the Old Testament, remember that. Now, who's been involved in this Molech worship? Some of your best friends. Richard Nixon, George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, Dick Cheney, Gerald Ford, Alan Greenspan, Walter Cronkite, Newt Gingrich, Alexander Haig, Jack Kemp, Henry Kissinger, John Major, William F. Buckley Jr., Justin Dart, William Randolph Hearst Jr., who owned a lot of the newspapers and everything, Caspar Weinberger, Charles Percy, George Shultz, Ed Teller, William Casey, Colin Powell, and the list could go on and on. And there have been quotes that I can't even quote in this setting about this Bohemian Grove. This stuff. It is basically, it's all men, and it's a sodomite gathering. This has been videotaped, and they have proven, it's documented, that this Bohemian Grove, they truck in male prostitutes to these gatherings. So they're not only offering sacrifice to Moloch and then leading our country, but it's a whole sodomite thing the whole time they're doing it. Here was a quote about this. The membership list has included every Republican U.S. president since 1923, as well as some Democrats. Many cabinet officials, directors and CEOs of large corporations, including major financial institutions, major military contractors, oil companies, banks, including the Federal Reserve, utilities, including the nuclear power, national media, broadcast and print, have high-ranking officials as club members or guests. One of the most revealing things that Alex Jones did is he tried to interview David Gergen. He's a guy that kind of sounds like Kermit the Frog, and he's on CNN all the time. And Alex Jones asked him, "Are you a member?" And he says, "None of your blankety-blank business," and got in his face threatening. That's how they feel about us knowing that they're doing this stuff. There were some like Nixon and Reagan who went to this stuff basically because they had to be president. They didn't like what they saw, and there's no evidence they took part in the sodomite stuff, but they all took part in this thing here. And it's like you said, well, no matter what your motivation, if you're taking part in devil worship, it's wrong. If you think you have to sell your soul to be president. I'm not even going to try to give you a complete list. It would take, I'm not kidding you, it would take hours for me to tell you how pervasive the worship of Lucifer is in this country. But you can look up some of this stuff on your own. There's this thing called the Waldorf schools. Not all private schools are good. Not all homeschooling is good. There are homeschoolers who are totally occultic. There are private schools that are totally occultic. The Waldorf schools have thousands of schools. Their teachers have to profess this faith called anthroposophy. It is a Luciferian philosophy. They actually do meditations on Lucifer and then teach their children in their classrooms. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people in America today who have graduated from the Waldorf schools under that indoctrination. You want to know why we have the president we have today? Here's just some other things to keep an eye out for is this Lucis Trust. They have branches in New York, London, Geneva. They publish the books of Alice Bailey, who is a Luciferian. Her books are being used in schools and everything. They run this thing called the Arcane School. They have 7 campuses around the world. They run a correspondence course that right now, as we speak, several 100,000 people have either graduated or are working their way through, and it's indoctrinating them in the worship of Lucifer. And they are a member organization of the United Nations and used as the education leaders, United Nations education. They use the Lucis Trust. But even the Watchtower, they worship a false Jesus who is an angel. They claim, they say it's Michael the Archangel. But their Jesus is not God. And He was created. So it's a false Jesus. And it's either, if it ain't Jesus, it's Lucifer. Another one, you think of the Mormon religion, their Jesus is the brother of Lucifer. That's their doctrine. Their Jesus is a created being. He's the brother of Lucifer. And Joseph Smith was a Freemason. And shortly after becoming a Freemason, he claimed he was visited by a winged angel who gave him the revelation. Now, what did we say earlier? Angels don't have wings. But who does? Lucifer. Lucifer is a fallen cherub. He has wings. You know who else received his revelation and is leading 1 billion people today to hell? Muhammad. He received the Quran supposedly from some 700-winged Gabriel or something like that. A winged angel. So we see this, like Lucifer, all the cults and false religions, they set up man as a god, just as Lucifer did, and they all reject the deity of Jesus Christ and that He is the way, the truth, and the life. It's what they all have in common. Trust me, folks, I am almost, I'd say on a weekly basis, I'm getting 3 or 4 messages from people coming after me because I defend the King James Bible and specifically the Isaiah 14:12 passage where it names Lucifer. And the thing they're trying to do today is to make people believe that's a mistranslation and that Lucifer isn't fallen from heaven and that Lucifer is the equal of Adonai, and if you tap into him, the God of light, because the word Lucifer means light bearer. And so they teach that that's how you then receive power to become God like yourself. So it's the Lucifer lie, just kind of a different twist to it. But you remember what he said in 2 Corinthians 4:4. He said, "In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not." So when we see, and again, folks, if you go do your homework, you're going to find that I just gave you like 1% of the evidence that this world is knowingly following Lucifer or unknowingly following Luciferian principles and philosophy. Just a small bit. Doesn't it make sense? Since Paul said it's Lucifer who has blinded those who believe not. So where are they going to go? But the thing is, just Christians waking up to it. The next time you hear, "I would like to thank God," from somebody receiving an award, don't take for granted they're talking about your God.
Amen.
And then you make it a practice to name your God. And yes, even when it's politically incorrect, even when they tell you not to. Jesus Christ is God. If your God did not come as a man who was born of a virgin to live a sinless life, in order to die as a substitute sacrifice for sinners, before being raised physically from the dead to conquer sin and death, ascend to heaven, and prepare a place for us, and to return to take us to be with Him, your God is Lucifer.
Amen.
That's the only true God. And if that's not your God is Lucifer.
Amen.
So we can summarize it just saying all counterfeits are Lucifer. That's it. And then verse 4 ends with the words, "Lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them." There's the alternative. Being blinded or being enlightened by the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, that should shine unto them. And so there you have it. Be sure to visit our website at kjvbiblebelievers.com, where you can find a wealth of MP3 audio message downloads, along with additional videos, articles, and links. This message is brought to you by Bible Believers Fellowship, P.O. Box 662, Worthington, Ohio 43085. I am Greg Miller. Thank you for listening.